Viewers, you're welcome to today's edition of Broken Not Shattered. Before we get into who we have in the studio today, I want to thank all our viewers and all our followers for following us week in, week out, and for stopping by to know what we do in the studio. And if you have not followed us, please do well to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and also do well to share the link with your family and friends so people could get to know what we do here. Meanwhile, Ike is meant to be in the studio with me again today, but unfortunately, he's on vacation. And I believe in the next episode, he's going to be here with me. However, today is your G, OBG, in the studio. And with me in the studio is Chris. Chris, please, I would want to give you the privilege of introducing yourself to the audience, how you want them to get to know you. Please,
Okay.
Chris, you're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Chris Hemmings. I'm a psychotherapist by trade now. For 10 years, I was a BBC journalist before I trained as a therapist. I run two organizations that are UK-based, but work all over the world. So the first one is Empath, which is M-Path, and that is a business where we're working with men's mental health, but we're trying to engage men in the realities of the cultural changes that are happening in the world, which is not easy, but we're working on it. And then the second business is a newer one, is called Men's Therapy Hub. That's been going in the UK for just under a year, and that is a directory of male therapists who want to work with more men, because in the course of my training to be a therapist, I found out some shocking statistics about the lack of men in therapy on both sides of the sofa. So there's not very many male therapists, and there's also not very many men in therapy. And actually, a lot of the men who do come to therapy, they don't last very long. They drop out early for reasons I can get into if you want. But basically, for the past 12, 13 years, from the moment the kind of big change in my life happened when my dad died 14 years ago. And my own personal reaction to his death drove this desire to want to better understand the way that men deal with emotional challenges, because I don't think we do it very well still. So a lot of my work is focused on that.
Wow, interesting. Now, speaking about your experiences, right, as a therapist, what do you think is basically the thing that leads men into, seeking for therapies first?
It's such a good question, because I think that there's every person who comes to therapy comes with a unique story, right? That's the thing that we're taught in therapy school. Like, every client is unique. But I've been working with men for many years now, and actually, what a lot of men come to therapy with is, and I kind of play out the scenario to simplify it, is I'll say to them, what's going on? And they'll say, I'm not really sure. And then I say, well, how does it feel to be you? And they say, I'm not really sure. And then I say, like, well, what's it like trying to talk about how you feel? I'm not really sure. And basically, how I explain it is that a lot of men are understandably now being asked to engage in the world in a more emotional way, particularly with their wives or their partners or their children. And they open up their emotional toolbox, and there isn't very much inside. And so what I'm trying to do as a therapist is trying to say to them, well, it's not your fault that there isn't much inside, because you were raised specifically not to have it. And so what we're going to do is, we're not going to try to make you female. We're going to try to understand these emotions as men together. And we're going to find the best way forward for you to start to try to understand yourself better, because how is it possible that somebody could understand how other people are feeling around them if they don't understand how they feel themselves? And so that's what I think a lot of the work is. It's starting with the self. And a lot of men, kind of traditional masculinity doesn't really start with the man looking at himself. It starts being the protector and the provider, right? Which are both great things, by the way. But can we also provide emotional safety? Can we protect through emotional safety? So I think that's what a lot of men are craving now, which perhaps 20, 30 years ago, men weren't craving so much.
And Chris, I tend to believe with you strongly on that, because in recent times we've come to understand that men do have feelings as well, and men also cry, right?
Some men, yeah.
Yeah.
All men
Yeah.
can cry, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking about that, how would you help a man learn how to express what he feels without having the words for it?
You know, that is a really big question. We've only got 30 minutes, so it's a big question to answer in 5 minutes even. So what it is it's about giving these men the space, and to give them the space away from judgment. Because I think one of the biggest barriers that we have as humans to personal development and growth is shame. And if you think about the way that we've been socialized as men, when we were teenagers, us, all the boys, me and my friends did it to each other. Anybody who showed any sort of weakness would be bullied for it, be called all these names that are not very helpful. And what that does is it makes us feel shame about feeling emotion. And so actually one of the things that my clients say to me most of all, we have a check-in after 4 sessions. And the thing that they say most often is, it's really weird to be in a space with another man and not feel judged for expressing vulnerability. And so actually what it's about creating the relationship between me and another guy and saying, you know what? It's okay that you're scared. It's okay that you're confused. It's okay that you're sad. And actually, based on what you've told me about your life, it would be strange if you weren't sad, just as an example. And then to say, okay, well, you understand sad, but then we can get a bit more complex than sad. So like, what is underneath the sad? What is driving the sad? But also, there are better terms than sad. You can be in despair. You can be discouraged. You can be overwhelmed. There's all of these different terms that we can use that all drive a feeling of sadness. But sadness is very basic. But that's where men understand happy, sad, angry, confused, maybe. But there's much more deeply complex. But we can't do the complexity unless we give them space to breathe into it. So do you know what? A lot of the time with my clients, I'm just sitting there quiet while they're struggling. And I'm just going, it's all right. I'm here. It's all good, man. Like, feel it. And then tell me how it feels afterwards, and creating that space, because so many of us as men haven't had that space growing up.
Wow, this is interesting. But speaking of vulnerability, Chris, do you think men fear vulnerability, or they fear what might happen if they become vulnerable in a relationship?
Yes. I absolutely believe that one of the biggest problems that we've created is that historically we have, understandably, I will say, discouraged men from being vulnerable. When we were, thousands and thousands of years ago, we're talking evolutionarily, like men didn't have the vulnerability, was weakness, like literally, because, you were not safe. It was very difficult to be safe. You're in a cozy studio with a printed cushion on it, man. Like you look pretty comfortable and safe in there now. Like we're not living like that anymore, And so what we're doing now is we are creating more environments for the vulnerability to come out. And what has happened, and I've actually had a conversation with a colleague about this recently, is what we're seeing is there are a lot of men come to therapy whose wives or partners, female wives or partners or girlfriends or mothers even, or sisters, but particularly wives and girlfriends, they are encouraging their man to be more vulnerable, to be more emotionally available. But then the problem is that when these men do start to be vulnerable, the wives and girlfriends don't know what to do with that information, because they haven't been trained really how to deal with the sudden. Because what happens is, imagine it's like a helium balloon, right? That you're keeping under the water, and then suddenly one day you let it out and it goes everywhere, and that's a lot for the people around you to deal with. And so there's a lot of challenge in that, in relationships, and then a lot of women, and not just women, a lot of men, society still isn't quite well equipped to deal with the anger, the pain, the screaming that can happen when a man finally releases the vulnerabilities that sometimes he's been holding for 10, 20 years, And so, yeah, I think that's something that we all need to work on. And I admire the men that come to do this work, because it takes incredible levels of courage to dare to tap into that vulnerability that they are frightened of, because they're frightened of it because their whole life they've been discouraged away from it. So it takes a lot for them to trust that it's going to be met with kindness and compassion.
Yeah, I get that very clear, and you did justice to that. Now, I want to move a little to, men have been defined over time to, be moved with physical touch, right? So, but beyond physical touch, what do you think makes men feel intimate in a relationship?
Well, it's difficult to move beyond physical touch because kind of sexual and physical intimacy is one of the is the biggest one. So I like that you already know that, so we can. But yes, that's the huge one. But you know what? A lot of men really crave is, there's two things I can think. The first one is like words of affirmation. So a lot of men want to feel like they are that they are worthwhile, that they are worth something. And I'm not talking about financial worth. I'm talking about being seen for the work that they are doing. We talk a lot about like the invisible work that women do in the home, and like, yeah, a lot of it, I get that. Men are also doing work too. It just sometimes isn't very obvious. And there are a lot of men who are out there working 2-3 jobs, desperately trying to put food on the table. They are working incredibly hard to create a home that is safe for their family, and there isn't a lot of praise for a man. The kind of joke now that the first time men get flowers is at their funeral. It's like a lot. Women will get a lot of compliments and praise, and men don't get that as much. And think about it, but like between you and your boys, like it's not normal for men to compliment each other. What we're doing actually is digging at each other and putting each other down. So that's the first one. But I would also say being seen is really important for a lot of men. But the problem with that is, if you are really reluctant to show the world who you really are, it's very difficult to feel seen. And this is not just in a relationship, because there's a quote from a guy that's been on my podcast, the No Man's an Island podcast, and Dr. Luke Sullivan was talking about a man can be in a room with 100 of his friends and still feel lonely because none of those friends actually know who he is. So in a relationship, it's really important that the partner to a man is patient and tries to create the space for him where she can really find out who he is, not the performative version of him. Because we all know that performative version of ourselves as men, the version of ourselves that we think that the world wants of us, that we think that our partner wants. But actually, who are we beneath all of that? Because beneath all of that, we're all scared sometimes. We're all doing our best. We all doubt ourselves. We struggle with self-esteem. Like, that happens. That's just the roller coaster of life. And so within relationships, if you can do that for your male partner, it's going to go a long way to make him feel safer, and therefore he'll be a better partner to you.
Let's dwell on this for a moment.
Mm.
Can you differentiate that with self-esteem? Complex issue. Is it a complexity issue for men?
So there's an interesting thing with self-esteem. So there's this quote from Dr. Christine Hubbard that I remember from my course, which is crazy because it was like 7 years ago now, which is self-esteem is what we think and feel and believe about ourselves. And now I add on to that it's usually based on how others perceive us. So, when you were a kid, maybe you had a little shelf that you had a medal on it and a certificate and a little trophy, or, all the things that you'd done well. Those are all little self-esteem boosts. And that's good. Like, there's nothing wrong with having self-esteem boosts. But the problem is that for men is that I've come up with this term of the markers of esteem. The markers of esteem for men used to be good paying job or steady job, house, car, family. And in the modern economy, that's increasingly difficult to achieve. So it's quite difficult for men to achieve those traditional markers of esteem that make them feel manly. And so what I'm trying to work on with my clients is, so to finish the Christine Hubbard quote, so self-esteem is what we think and feel and believe about ourselves, but self-worth is recognizing that we are greater than all of those things. Because Obi, if I was to take away your podcast, right, and I was to take away your nearly 10,000 Instagram followers, and I was to take, like, you're still a good person, right? You're still a good guy, and you're still worthy of love and care. Even if you're not quote successful, you're still worthy of love and care. And I don't think a lot of guys feel that. I think a lot of men still feel like if they are not financially secure, if they are not quote successful, then the world is going to care about them less. And unfortunately, that does play out. You know, the vast majority of homeless people are male, just as an example. The world doesn't take care of men in that same way. And so, to me, what I talk about with a lot of my clients is, yeah, we can talk about self-esteem. That's important. But self-esteem is always on shaky ground. Self-worth, if you develop self-worth, when I went through the darkest period of my life, this is what I focused on. And my therapist said to me, if I took away your 20,000 Twitter followers, aren't you still worthy of love? You know, when you were born, did your mum say, is this baby attractive? Is this baby like smart? Is this baby good looking? You know, is this baby successful? No, it's a baby and it's worthy of love and care. And you haven't lost that. But society doesn't play into that. Actually, society tells us the opposite. So it would be really nice if we started to let men know that they are still worthy of love and care regardless. And that's the self-worth part. So self-esteem is great, but self-worth, even better.
We're going to go on a very short break. And when we're back, I'm going to ask you a question on Men's Therapy Hub and the Empath. And I want you to take your time and fill us with that. So we're going to go on a very quick break and we'll be back. Hey guys, we're back again. Today, unfortunately, Ike is still not in the studio with me. He's on vacation, and I believe we'll be back in the next episode. Thank you, followers, for following us, and thank you for subscribing to our channel. Please do wait to subscribe if you've not subscribed to this channel. Share with your loved ones to also click, like, and follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Instagram. So back to the discourse. Chris is here in the studio with us. Chris, please tell us more about Men's Therapy Hub and Empath. And again, tell us what has been the challenges in trying to build that organization.
Well, I'll do it in chronological order. So I'll start with Empath. I launched Empath in 2019. I wrote a book about men in 2016. It came out in 2017. I started being asked to do talks and workshops and around the idea of men and masculinity. And so I launched this business Empath, and we've been going into, you know, I lost count, maybe 1,000 schools over 10 years, maybe not quite that many, but close. And the idea is that we're going into schools and we're talking to young boys. And the thing that we're not doing is telling them that they're wrong. We're not saying there's anything wrong with masculinity. In fact, we're saying that it's wonderful. What we're saying is, perhaps we can be better to ourselves and each other. And you know, the name of the brand is M-Path, and it's a play on words because it's about empathy, right? It's about developing empathy. And it's what I said before. What I say to the boys is basically, like, I understand how difficult all of this is for you. Right now, culturally, we're telling boys that they have to understand what it's like to be female, to be trans, to be gay, to be different races and religions and everything. And nobody is asking them how it feels to be them. So that's what we're doing. We're going in and saying, we see you, boys. We understand how difficult it is to be a 12-year-old boy, particularly in some of the most deprived parts of the UK. You know, there are some boys who are living in like real poverty, and they're just told that they're privileged. And I think that's appalling because they're not. This idea of universal male privilege, which, you know, as a black man, I know for certain that you can understand is not true, right? Like, universal male privilege is ridiculous. I'm a privately educated middle-class English man, right? I have loads of privilege, but there's still places where I don't feel privileged. And it doesn't mean that it's a contest, right? So I'm trying to go into the boys and I'm trying to help them to understand that I see them and I see the struggle that they're in, but also to encourage them to say, well, let's be better for each other. Let's try and make you and your boys communicate better with each other, and therefore also the girls around you and everybody else, you know? So then we also go into businesses and do men's mental health workshops in big businesses. So that's Empath. And then Men's Therapy Hub. I finished my therapy course 4 years ago now. And I had multiple experiences on the course, a course where there were 4 men and nearly 20 women, and one of the men dropped out. There were more Black and Asian women than there were men on the course, which is great for Black and Asian women, don't get me wrong, but that's not enough men. And so many times I would be asking about the male experience, and I would see the eye rolls from the women in on the course, and the talking about male issues and kind of being questioned about why it matters. And that it's absurd, because my experience of existence as a man is so different than your experience of existence as a woman. And starting to research and starting to understand it and realizing just how few men and the number of men in therapy is decreasing rapidly. So I had an idea of creating a directory that is male therapists for men. And we've been launched for just under a year. We're about to launch a new website. We're about to launch in the US. We've not had massive success yet in terms of getting clients in, because we're going for the most difficult option there is. But we have 160 odd male therapists in the UK who are supporting us and paying their £5 a month to support us. And then we're going to launch in the US. And the plan is to get as many men into therapy as possible, because I believe in the power of therapy. I don't think that every man should have a male therapist. I don't think that men are better therapists than women. I just think it would be really helpful for men to see that there is a place that is designed for them, and that there are men here, and there are men of every possible description that you could imagine, because men are not an homogenous mass. Men are varied and richly different, just like everybody else is. And so to say, hey, if you're a man and you're looking for therapy, maybe this might be a good place to start, because here are a load of men that want to work with you specifically because you're a man. And it's that simple. And then so I started my own podcast called No Man's an Island, and to talk about men's issues, because there's so many really interesting people doing work in this space who don't get enough coverage, because men's issues still aren't really politically popular, although we're working on it.
Interesting. I guess you did that very well. So, Chris, I believe that, we believe that men are pressured to prove their masculinity, right?
A lot of men,
what do you think could be what drives men, or the pressure behind men to prove their masculinity? And then you have a book, Be a Man. How does that book, or how did that book address this?
So the book was called Be a Man, and the subtitle was How Macho Culture Damages Us and How to Escape It. And I think the challenge with masculinity is that we have created, a system has been created. You and I didn't create it, but we've all upheld it in our own ways. And it's called precarious manhood, precarious masculinity, because the same doesn't exist with women. Women don't have to go around proving their femininity. Like, they are given the femininity card from birth, and they don't have to prove it. But for men, we've created an environment, or an environment has been created for men, where many men feel like they have to constantly try and prove their masculinity all the time. And it's very easy to slip up. It's very easy to fall off that wagon and be ridiculed and mocked and shamed, like we were talking about before. And so in a culture where male dominance, if you want to call it that, is still deeply ingrained into our psyche, it's that dominance that plays the role in the fight to prove your masculinity all the time. Because if you think about it, I don't use the term toxic masculinity because I don't think it's helpful. But if you think of all of the, and this is actually one of the little workshops that in schools we do the workshop, and one of the exercises is, tell me all of the traits you associate with the term toxic masculinity. And so it will be like violence, aggression, being arrogant. I could keep going. Every single one I've ever had in years of doing it is about dominance. Every single one is about dominance. So for me, the best thing I ever did was stop caring whether or not I'm better or worse than anybody else, and that I'm me, and that's good enough, and I don't have to talk my friends down to feel better about myself. Like I say in the workshop, like the biggest bullies that they're the most insecure people that because they have to make you feel worse in order for them to feel better. Now, that is often not their fault. They've come from difficult backgrounds, but that's the point of it, is we're trying to step over each other. And as men, if we can step back from that and say, we're not in a competition, we're all in this together and we can support each other. And your success doesn't mean that I've failed, but that's not how we think. So to move away from that dominance narrative, and that's why we still have this sad reality that so many men are constantly trying to prove their masculinity all the time, and it's so exhausting, and it's so freeing when you stop.
I get that feeling. So the best thing is no competition. You're not into any competition with anybody, not at all.
Well, healthy competition, like I used to play football and cricket, like healthy competition is fine. I was the biggest kid in the world on the cricket pitch, right? Like I was really good at cricket, but the second I stepped off it ended, we were friends again. Like a bit of healthy competition. But what I don't like is the putting each other down. Your friends, the people you're supposed to love, like, or feeling like, oh, one of my friends has got a new car. Oh, that makes me feel bad because I don't have a new car. But your friend's got something nice. That's good for him, right? Well done for him. Encouraging each other, being more supportive of each other as men. That to me is the change. There's nothing like competition is healthy competition is fine. I think it's important actually to teach kids how to lose, how to win gracefully, how to compete fairly, but also how to recognize that sometimes, there's a great quote from Rudyard Kipling's poem If, which is if you can treat with triumph and disaster and meet those two imposters both the same, because they are. Some people get lucky and some people don't. Some people are born with the ability to work harder than others, and that's fine. Some people are born with real challenges in life, but that doesn't mean that they're failures, And if we stop seeing each other like that, then I think it's going to go a long way to reduce the challenges that we as men experience together.
Interesting. Chris, I don't feel like leaving here. I don't feel like stepping out of the studio. I just want us to remain in the studio. It's been a very interesting moment, to be honest. Chris, how can people get in touch with you? Viewers will want to get in touch with you. How would they get in touch with Chris?
Yeah, well, you can go to my website, which is just chrishemmings.co.uk. So that's .co.uk. Or you can go to empath at m-path.co.uk, or you can go to menstherapyhub.co.uk. If you want a male therapist, go there. But or listen to our podcast, No Man's an Island. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, all the places that you find a podcast. And I need to do more promotion like you do, Obi, of all of the places. You're very good at that. I need to learn from that.
Interesting, Chris. You're the guy. Chris, we have a culture in Broken Not Shattered, and that culture is the last guest will always drop a question for the next guest, irrespective of who the guest is. And there is no right or wrong answer for it.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you the question from the last guest, and you're going to drop a question for the next guest.
Yeah.
You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Good. So the last guest asked, how are you coping with life?
How am I coping with life?
Sure.
Right now, I'm struggling to find a place to live because we were going to buy a place and then it fell through, and that was quite challenging. And so I'm a little bit unsettled. I'm actually in a friend's house right now. So how do I cope with that? I try to be kind to myself. I try to be compassionate and recognize that I'm doing the best that I can. I try not to fall into bad habits of drink and drugs, which I've used in the past. I try to give myself some time to move my body every day. I think that's the most important thing. I'm nearly 40 years old now. And so that's really important. So I think my number one answer would be to try to be self-compassionate and recognize that I'm doing my best, and there's no more than I can do than that right now.
to be honest, initially I felt there was not going to be a right or wrong answer to the question, but you gave a perfect answer to it.
Thank you. Thank you. I've worked on that answer.
So what's going to be your own question?
Do you know what? It's an interesting, because I have a question that I like to ask men in particular, and I don't know if it's going to be a man who's your guest next. But I like to ask, there's a common question that people ask men, which was, when was the last time you cried? And I don't want to ask that question. I want to ask, when was the last time you cried tears of joy?
Whoa.
Because I think if you can reach that place, I think you're doing something right. Because when I cry tears of joy, it's the best feeling in the world. And I didn't know how to start crying tears of joy until I did this work on myself. So I would like to ask your next guest when they last cried tears of joy. Thank
you so much, Chris.
It's been a pleasure.
Before you leave the studio, just give us your last word.
My last word: life is hard. I don't agree with the Buddhist mantra of all life is suffering, but a shitload of life is suffering. And so if you can find 10, 20 minutes in your day to do something good for yourself, go for a walk without your phone, sit and do some breathing, just stretch your body, do something, life's going to be a little bit easier. It's never going to be easy, but it'll be easier.
Wow. Thank you so much, Chris, for stopping by. To be honest, I didn't feel like stepping out of the studio. You glued me to the studio, and I believe you glued the audience to the studio. It's something that men are not used to, but I think it is time we start to create their awareness. And thank you for what you do. Please, I beg of you, don't stay far. We would want you back in the studio again.
I'll come back whenever you want. I'll come back whenever you want.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All
so
right.
Viewers, I just want to thank you for staying with us to this end. Again, if you're not following us, do well to follow us on all our social media platforms: YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. Till we meet again, we'll say peace, love, and more grace. Chris, bye.
Bye-bye.